Thanks so much for making time
Not
to
at all.
chat about your latest book, which I've actually had for quite a while. Yoga, also for the Godless.
Godless, yes.
And I have to admit that it was this that finally induced me to read the Yoga Sutras. Even though I've had them for a long time, I never
Okay,
actually
okay.
got through the short text
I know.
before you wrote them. So thank you for
Thank
that
you.
also.
Good thing to read the Yoga Sutras, It's the standard textbook on Yoga Darshanas. Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to say was that I usually ask you about the origin story of every book, but in this case, you included it
Yes.
in the book itself.
Yes.
So do you want to just share the
Sure.
tidbit of what that is?
Sure. So, one thing I want to make clear is that this is not, as you notice on the cover, yoga for the godless. It's yoga also for the godless. The also word is very important. Why? Because personally, I don't think whether you believe in God or whether you don't believe in God has any uh, influence on yoga, on your trying to learn yoga. And this came about because a young corporate young lady came to me and said she went to learn yoga to a couple of persons. And one person said that if you have to learn yoga, you have to join this society, this, well, in quotes, cult. Uh, then we will teach you yoga. She went to another person and he said, yes, I can teach you yoga, but you have to chant these praises to Ganesha and various other things without which we can't practice yoga. So she said, can I practice yoga for my health and well-being and also for my mind to be tranquil without getting into the belief systems? Any belief system. She didn't mind which belief system. She said any belief system. Believe me, this was coming from someone who came from a very orthodox family and kind of rebelled against it, from a Hindu family. And so she said, I want to learn yoga. So she came to me and said, what do you think? I said, look, according to me, to learn yoga per se, you don't need to have any belief system in your head. You can go ahead because it's a systematic, scientific, step by step approach to understanding yourself, not understanding God. Yoga doesn't claim that. So that's why I decided, let me write this book. I also had in mind various systems of philosophy and also political affiliations where people don't believe in God, who are atheists. In a way, I would say even the Buddhist system of thought is quite atheistic because there is no such creator God, also the Jains. So, this is the reason why I decided, let me put out a book showing that the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, let me give me a minute. You know that there are different schools of philosophy in India. You know that they are called the darshanas. Darshana is an important word because it's like, you know what darshan is, to see face to face. So all the systems of philosophy in India, which are called darshanas, is an attempt to see the truth. Right. So there is Mimamsa, there is Nyaya, there is Vedanta, there is Sankhya, there is Yoga. Yoga comes in the end. What we need to understand is much of the terms used in the Yoga Darshana are borrowed from Sankhya or adopted from Sankhya. Now, Sankhya is an ancient system of philosophy in India. One of the ancient darshanas. It is even before Vedantic thought. There is already the Sankhya system because even Shankara, when he discusses matters, he quotes many of the terms which are already available in Kapila's Sankhya, like tattvas, for instance, gunas. These are all words that have come from Sankhya, and Kapila is a sage who is so important, not only because he is a founder of Sankhya. Now, the word meaning of Sankhya could also be figures, numbers, Sankhya, right? So, it's a very philosophical and scientific system, and it's an ancient system, and it's so important even in the times when the Bhagavad Gita was written, brought out, because Krishna, one of the characters in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna and Arjuna, Vyasa makes Krishna say, when he describes his glories, among the mountains I am the Meru, and among the among the immovables I am the Himachala, and and so on and so forth. Among the Vedas I am the Samaveda. He says, among the Munis I am Kapila. So Kapila is very, so the founder of Sankhya is Kapila, and Sankhya is basically a dualistic, atheistic philosophy, because there is no creator God there. When I say atheistic, it means there is no creator God there. That's what is meant. There is a divinity, but there is no creator God who sits down, fashions images and throws them on the earth and then whips them if they don't behave properly, or if you cry with compassion and praise this God. I think this God whom we keep praising must be very egotistic. If you don't praise, you are likely to suffer. There is no such Godhead in Sankhya. There is no such creator God in Sankhya. However, there is a concept of Ishvara, and this Ishvara is also taken into yoga, into the yoga darshanas. And when in the, I said dualistic because they believe that there are two eternal things, Prakriti and Purusha. Prakriti is this whole creation, and they believe that this creation came about through chemical changes and adaptation and so on and so forth, with an inbuilt intelligence in the organic systems, right? And Purusha is consciousness which is behind the Prakriti, Purusha. And this Purusha is all pervading, but it is covered by Prakriti. And each human being, each living being also has an aspect of Purusha as part of the system. The whole process of yoga is to separate or to remove the influence of Prakriti on the mind, so that when the mind becomes quiet, tranquil and calm, it reflects only the Purusha, which is consciousness. When that Purusha is reflected individually, it becomes clear that it is not individual but universal, although it is represented in an individual. The Purusha, that Purusha which is universal in its aspect of being a universal or pervading, intelligent and conscious being, not intelligent, not part of the process of creating the world and change. That happens, Prakriti has its own way of doing it. This Purusha, the universal Purusha, Sankhya, Kapila refers to as Ishvara, which means the primordial source of wisdom and consciousness. Wisdom. The same Ishvara has also been referred to in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Do you have any question, or shall I carry on for a while?
You can carry on. I do have questions, but sure. It's good. Always great to hear you
Let's
talk.
Clear this up. Yeah. So, so therefore, however, a person or a yogi who has understood or realized this Purusha in himself or herself. Now this happens according to the Yoga Sutras through Chitta Vritti Nirodha, through the elimination of all distractions of the mind. When this happens, the mind becomes clear like a mirror, calm, like an ocean without waves, which is impossible to imagine. And in that, then there is only the Purusha remaining. And that state is called Kaivalya. Vedanta uses the word moksha. Buddhism uses the word nirvana. Mm. But Yoga Darshana and Sankhya Darshana use the word Kaivalya. Kaivalya. Now, what is Kaivalya is derived from the Sanskrit root Kevala, that means only, Kevalam. Now, here only means when that is understood and realized, you see that there is only one Purusha. So, somewhere the duality ends and there is only unity. They will not acknowledge theoretically, but yes, it is there. So, now this, and if any human being or a yogi has realized this Purusha, that person may also be called Ishvara or may be considered Ishvara because he has touched that. And that concrete person who has touched that abstract reality can also be called Ishvara. Now, there is a danger here because then everybody who says that I have realized would claim to become Ishvara. Now, that danger is there, of course. We have to be careful about that danger. So, that is there. However, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there are only even the word Ishvara, which means generally Creator God, but here it refers to the Ishvara of Sankhya, also has been said only couple of times, not too many times. And also, when Patanjali describes the practice of yoga, which is the second chapter, Madanapalle, he says, among other things, Ishvara Pranidhanatva is also useful. When you say tva, means also. He says, Swadhyaya, self-study, Ishvara Pranidhanatva. This, which I described to you, is Kriya Yoga. Nowhere does Patanjali call this yoga Ashtanga Yoga, although there are 8 angas. But Patanjali doesn't use the term. He calls it Kriya Yoga. If you give me a minute, I will find that sloka for you from the Sadhana Pada. Just give me a minute, sorry. You know, I am very bad at by hearting. So, here is the first sutra of the Sadhana Pada. Tapa Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. Austerity, which means simplicity in life and various factors, which is studied in the Yoga Sutra. Self-study. Swadhyaya means self-study. It could also means study of the self. And Ishvara Pranidhanani also dedication to the primordial wisdom, which is Ishvara, or Kriya Yoga. Tapa Swadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. This is how he begins the Yoga Sutra. And in one more place, he refers to Ishvara in the Vibhuti Pada. Now, Vibhuti Pada is the chapter which shows through the practice of Samadhi, which has been discussed in Sadhana Pada, one attains certain almost superhuman capacities, almost. I mean, normal people don't have that capacity, which means the mind expands to a greater level and they can do things which normally not possible for people to do. Okay. This Patanjali has a habit of putting what is required in one chapter into another chapter. So, the last chapter of Patanjali is called the Kaivalya Pada, which means the state of being free of all influence of Prakriti, when all the vrittis of the mind stuff have been removed and the mind is calm and one experiences Kaivalya, which is the Purusha, experience of the Purusha. So in Sutra 1 of the Kaivalya Pada, he says, Janma Aushadhi Mantra Tapas Samadhija Siddhaya. Siddhis are vibhuti, siddhis or extraordinary capacities manifest due to birth, sometimes due to some, the case of young children who are born with some extraordinary capabilities. Like they may behave very unintelligent in many ways, but they are good at, say, music. They're called born something, I don't know the name.
Savants.
Savants. So, special capacities, siddhis can manifest due to birth, due to aushadhi, drugs. Patanjali has not left drugs out. He says that chemically also it could be induced, not the ultimate state of Kaivalya, but the vibhutis, the extraordinary capacities, and tapaha, austerity, through mantra, mantra japa, and through samadhi. In the state of samadhi also this is possible. This is what he says.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I'll stop now. Yes.
So there was so much in what you covered, but going sort of in reverse order, I live in Berkeley, where everyone is trying to get into some sort of state with drugs, and you do a good job of talking about just sort of the danger of that. Because even now, respectable people in the United States do things like microdosing of LSD and psychedelic substances, and the level of cannabis use is prolific. It's everywhere here. So could you just share a little bit more about the trials or the downfalls of attempting to sort of navigate the path using substances?
Right. Now wait a minute. When Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras refers to drugs, to Aushadha, what he is trying to say is not that you can attain the Kaivalya through drugs, or you can attain moksha through drugs. What he is trying to say is even with drugs, you could induce an expansion of the mind. But wait, but the aim of yoga is not that. He is only expressing what is obvious, which some people experiment with chemicals to get an expansion of mind. But that expansion is frowned upon by yoga actually, because in the yoga system of sadhana, you start with yama niyamas first, do's and don'ts, and one of the strict don'ts is drugs. He is not saying you should use drugs. You see, please make this very clear. He is not saying that you should use drugs to attain some state. He is saying through drugs also, it is possible to temporarily expand the mind. He did not use the word temporary, but we know it. But the actual yogic practitioner, a yogi, is one who keeps himself free from any substances which are likely to make his mind move away from his control or her control. You need perfect control to do one-pointed attention. I have seen people with drugs, they don't really have one-pointed attention for a short while. Then it begins to go round and round in different directions, and they have no control over their mind. The whole process of yoga is to control the mind. Now, I have seen people having LSD, totally distracted world. Yoga demands that there should be no distraction. The very definition of yoga, yogas chitta vritti nirodha, simply means removing all distractions from the mind and making it self-sufficient and be tranquil without the help of anything from outside, including thoughts. So, take drugs out. This is not what is meant. People have misused and misinterpreted this sentence. Even in India, it is not just in California and Berkeley, no. You go up to the Himalayas walking, fortunately or unfortunately, This cannabis grows naturally in the Himalayas. You don't have to buy cannabis from the shops in the US like you have, but you can actually go and pluck some leaves. It grows naturally. I feel that when the wind hits it and in a mild kind of smell of it wafts in, it doesn't cause any harm. When you start using it, you are in trouble. So, but it is available. It's there in many parts, not in the higher parts where it is too cold. No, Badri, you will not find it, but in the lower foothills, it's available. So, what happens? Many of the so called sadhus that you meet as you go are basically drug addicts. If you go to their place, they will say, oh, do you want a chillam? Do you want a puff? And after taking the puff, then they say Har Har Mahadev, Om Namah Shivaya, and they think they are in a trance. But this is not the trance which the yogi aims at. Yogi aims at expansion of consciousness through stilling the distractions of the mind without the help of any external substances.
Right.
Through diet control, through proper food, through austerity and simplicity. The yama niyamas are there through non-violence. I have seen some so-called sadhus in the Himalayas. I have lived, I have travelled, who after taking this become very violent
Really?
with their
Why
disciples.
was that?
Huh?
They become violent with their disciples?
With their, yeah, and they get very angry, start shouting. I mean, the first yama niyama of Yoga Sutras is ahimsa, non-injury to other living beings. So, what happens? They want to be non-injurious to practice ahimsa, but the drug takes them off. They don't know what they're doing. So, anything that takes your mind out of your control is not conducive to the practice of yoga, and we are not seeking wisdom through that. Although Patanjali admits that some expansion of mind to certain levels is possible through the use of drugs. Full stop.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think it's important that it's
Very
often
important.
glossed over.
Yes,
Yeah.
very important.
You know, early on in this book, you also describe yoga as a technology, and I think that's a very interesting distinction, because technologies can be used by anyone, right? It's a wielder, and yet you talk about that's why morality was built in to the practice.
Yes, you got it.
But the question is, can you advance in yoga without morality?
No. 100% no. You might go to some level. You can see these cases happen in many places. Somebody has been following all the moral laws. When I say moral laws, I mean laws meant to conserve one's energies. The control over food, which will cause you to have good food, pure food. The vow to not hurt other living beings, and so on. There are the simplicity in living. In fact, even non-acceptance of gifts, which is very difficult in this world at this point, because it has various connotations to it. When you take a gift, the yogi believes you are taking something from that person in the form of vibrations into yourself, which may or may not be good for you. Apart from the fact that when you start taking gifts, you always expect a gift from a person, and therefore you treat the person who doesn't bring you a gift on a certain different level altogether, which a yogi should not be doing. So, there are some rules. Now, we have seen in this world many people who first practice yama niyamas and then develop. And they have come to the certain stage of not Kaivalya, but the chapter on Vibhuti, the level of Vibhuti Pada, then they suddenly lose their morals. And then what happens? By then they have built up some capacities. And these capacities they begin to use in a very self-centered manner to build up money, to do various factors. Generally, they fall in the end. When they fall in the end, they are neither worldly wealthy nor are they spiritually wealthy. Both are gone. So therefore, there is this safety valve and you can advance up to a certain level, but you cannot go beyond that if you don't practice the Yamaniyamas. 100%. The fall comes very fast. The fall also comes when the ego becomes so big that you think you know everything. Nobody knows everything, not even a great yogi. You may be slightly better than the other guy, but you certainly don't know everything. Maybe in the state of samadhi when only the Purusha is there, everything is there. But since you have to come back to your physical body, the limitations are also there still to some extent. They are not been totally wiped out.
Right.
So this is the thing we have to be very careful about. So therefore, when you have become really truly non-self-centered, then you have become a complete yogi. Then even if you have some vibhutis or capacities, you would use it for a good purpose rather than for yourself. Which is why in the first place these capacities are put. See, I know in some book I have written about a simple technique of how to leave the body. I am not given all the serious complicated techniques because everybody cannot practice and there are dangers of the subtle body and the physical body interaction and so. So, but I have given a simple, many people go on practicing and say I am not able to leave. There is a safety valve there and the safety valve is put there because suppose, just imagine, don't even have to believe this, suppose your subtle body leaves the physical body. And suppose there is a subtle body which leaves the physical body. Now this subtle body which we call Sushma Sharira or Linga Sharira has a capacity to penetrate through barriers. There are no barriers for the subtle body. You don't have to believe this. I am just, let us say, discussing a theory. Barriers. So it can go through barriers, it can see like we see with our eyes, it can hear, it can smell, but there are two things missing. It cannot taste and it cannot bring anything back, can't grab anything back. Because since you know it penetrates through physical structures, if you put your hand around a cup, your hand goes through it, you can't bring it. These two things. But the danger still is there that you might go, that tomorrow the KGB might learn how to leave the body and go and look into what the CIA is doing. Danger is there. Unfortunately or fortunately for us, it is not possible because the moral perfection is not there, without which it is impossible to do it.
So you're saying even that simple technique that you gave is impossible without moral perfection?
Moral, at least some moral perfection and calmness of mind and tranquility. It is not possible. Good. Because some of the yogic powers are like 100 megaton atomic bombs, and to give it to people, it's like keeping a little child in a room which is surrounded on all walls by dynamite, and then giving a matchbox also and a matchstick and saying, this is how you light the matchstick. This is exactly why there are restrictions. You can blow up the whole thing, even innocently.
Right. You know, the Yoga Sutras, as you've mentioned, start with this, this phrase, Chitta Vritti Nirodha. And that word Nirodha is interesting because sometimes people translate it as annihilation, right?
Annihilation.
But what is it that we're really talking about here? I mean, is it a pure quieting of the mind or an extinguishing of the mind? Because you've also talked about how, and the Yoga Sutras talk about how in a certain quieting, Purusha remains. But is that Purusha within the mind or is it beyond the mind?
These are two questions actually. Uh, the first question, Nirodha. Now, the word used is Nirodha, not Samhara. If the word Samhara, Chitta Vritti Samharam was used, which means totally, what do you call that? Wiping out all the vrittis, killing all the vrittis, it becomes more, but Nirodha means controlling and getting rid of. Getting rid of, but not in that destructive manner, but basically it means calming the waves of the chitta. The chitta consists of waves moving up and down, and the whole process of yoga is how to calm down these vrittis. There is also a reason given why this is required, because when the vrittis are calm, then the mind becomes like a mirror, completely clean mirror with no aberrations of any kind. In this mirror, then the mind realizes the reflection of the Purusha. Now, when it realizes the reflection of the Purusha, then for some time the mind ceases to exist. There is only the Purusha. This is called Samadhi. But the mind comes back naturally, back to the conscious state. When it comes back, in that mirror it still carries a faint reflection of Purusha, which is why a yogi who goes into Samadhi and comes out is different from a person who has not gone into Samadhi. There is that faint reflection still remaining and the understanding that any time you can go back to it if you want. Otherwise, it would not even be possible to function like this. I can't speak, I can't, because everything is gone. But it can't go forever, it will come back. When it comes back, there are still faint traces of it in the mind, a reflection. And for that reflection to happen, you need to remove the vrittis. And if you go to the first chapter of the Yoga Sutras, which is Samadhi Pada, you will see the reasons why these vrittis are there. The reason why the vrittis are there because of desire and wrong understanding that the real is unreal and the unreal is real. This is where the vrittis come from. So, ignorance is the root of vrittis. Ignorance of what? Ignorance by which one thinks what is real is unreal and what is unreal is real. So, we have to go to the root of that also to be able to get free of the vrittis. It cannot be done only by practice of pranayama, which is of course important. The theoretical understanding also has to be there. What is the origin of the vrittis and how to be free of this, how to carefully and intelligently look at this and decide what is real and what is not real. The basic definition being that which is always there is real and that which is here today and gone tomorrow is unreal. So, both are required. So you see how wisely Patanjali has given the first chapter as not practice but as Samadhi Pada, which means the theoretical exploration of where we are and what we are doing and where are we going. Then comes the practice. Unfortunately, what happens? People start with practice.
So you talk about that, we talked about in the past how practice is like opening the doors and windows, but you're not in control when the breeze blows, right? Breeze can blow through any time.
Absolutely.
And so in that analogy, if you talk about Samadhi as the breeze blowing, it feels like the actual attainment initially is almost an accidental thing. You're not in control of it. You can't make it happen?
You cannot make samadhi happen, but you can make all the requisite situation in which samadhi can happen. This is practice. If you don't do that, then the Purusha is there, but we don't know the Purusha. The breeze is there, but it doesn't touch us.
So it also sounds like at some point the yogi gets skilled enough to be able to enter at will. Like the first time you enter is accidental. And then
it's not accidental. It's not accidental. Yogi is through constant abhyasa, through constant practice. Yogi develops the capacity to bring his mind to the state where the windows are open. Let's put it this way. He is still not controlling the breeze, because when I enter into the picture, then it becomes a small being entering the picture. The whole thing is consciousness, which is Purusha. The more I stay out of it, the better. You know what I mean? I hope.
Yeah. So you practice to be able to open the windows, and then when the wind blows, you sort of enter that state. But then does there come a time when you are able to consciously get the wind to blow?
You cannot consciously get the wind. See, when the limited being called my consciousness, it is dependent on the vrittis. My particular consciousness is dependent on the vrittis to some extent. It may be very subtle, but it's still there. When that is wiped out, then only the consciousness of Purusha is there. You can say that I have become an expert in at any point in opening the windows and the doors. This I can say. Beyond that I cannot say. I can't say personally. I know that much I can do at a given moment through grace or hard work or whatever you want to call it. But I can't say that I can dictate when the wind blows. This I cannot say. But remember that once you get a whiff of the wind, a whiff, the taste of that whiff is so well seated in your heart, in your mind, that it can fight most vrittis away. This can happen. And you long for it more than anything else. Then you are established on the path of yoga.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. You know, in the Yoga Sutras, it talks about, there's a lot of discussion about Om also. Om as the manifestation of Ishvara. There's a few verses that sort of talk about that. So, is Patanjali saying that the sounds that we sometimes hear in meditation are the first contact with that inner wind, or rather the wind that's blowing?
Yeah, it's better not to use the word wind, you know, like it. Anyway, yeah, what it means is that more than sight, more than visuals, more than words, sound is more important. In the beginning of creation, even if you go back to the old hymns of creation, what happens is first there is a sound, there is a sound. Now it's not only in the Indian wisdom, it's also there. If you read the Gospel according to St. John in the Bible, I think somewhere along the line when the church came up, the Bible became kind of diluted. So anyway, we will not talk about the church. But so it says like this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay. Now I'll quote you something from the Rig Veda. Prajapati vai idam agre asit. There was Prajapati, the supreme creator, the supreme being, Prajapati, Lord of all Praja. Vai idam, he existed alone, or it existed alone. Vai idam agre asit was tasya vak divitya asit, and that was the word that existed, vak. And third, vak vai parabrahmam, that word was none other than the supreme Prajapati. So wait a minute. So now this word, when they say word, they mean sound actually, not a word invented by human beings or through language. Here vak means sound, the primordial sound. So there is some primordial sound always there existing also in this universe. When a forest fire burns, if you listen, there is a natural sound going on, like oh, it goes on. You hear the same sound in the sea, in the waterfall, when it rains. How do people say it rains? Oh, it's raining. So there is some sound which is in the universe, and there is also some internal sound which one hears when the mind is quiet. We are saying that this internal sound is linked to the universal sound. What we hear inside in deep meditation, the little sounds like cicadas, like tinkling of bells, sometimes the heartbeat, like a damaru, sometimes kind of a semi-musical sound. Now these are links to the universal sound. And in deep meditation, the yogi begins to hear these sounds. Okay. Now if you go to the Upanishads, which are the earliest teachings regarding these matters, I think maybe in the world, this particular sound called the pranava is given great importance. Now let us not make this into a denominational sound. It does not belong to any denomination. It is sound, pure sound. Because it is Om or it is Hindu or it is Christian, it is a sound. It so happens that in ancient times all this was written in Sanskrit. So naturally we got it in Sanskrit. So it does not mean it belongs to a denomination. It is a universal sound. Now this inner sound and that Om, which is the supreme sound that exists all over, everywhere, even in the little atoms, in the little quantum matters. If somebody can travel in, probably they will hear this sound. This sound of Om, it starts with an O, A. You know the basic sound is A. Even a dumb person can say A, even if they can't speak. And then it develops into the modification of O. And then it ends in Ma, Om. The yogis have found through experiment, through practice, through investigation and through actual experience that this sound of Om, when chanted properly in its proper manner, has a way of removing all the vrittis of the chitta and connecting the mind to the Purusha. Therefore, Om is given a lot of importance in the Yoga Sutras also, because the Upanishads of course have talked so much about Om, but in fact it is a natural sound. Even if you are talking in any language, you are Italian or Chinese, or if somebody asks you, okay, are you coming, and you do not want to use a word, what would you normally say? It is a natural thing. You say means Om. You are not actually saying Om, but it is Om. And in this Om, there are two parts. One is the first sound, which is the spiritual aspect of it. The other is that which touches the human body and the centers of consciousness, that is the last sound, Ma. You go to a hospital, a place where patients are convalescing, the most common sound you would hear, it comes naturally, built in. Mm, mm, mm. You know, that last part is soothing, it builds immunity, it helps in many ways to sort of bring about the healing that takes place. Sound. And the first two sounds are creative sounds, and oo. They are the ones that create, and the last sound is the finishing of all creation and rest, total rest. So now, when in deep meditation one hears the sound of Om, hold on to that sound. It may be either Om or it may be just or oo or Now for a practical purpose, now in this COVID season, I have been teaching people to chant the last sound of Om as Brahmari, which means like because it's been scientifically proved and discovered that it produces nitric oxide in the sinuses. The nitric oxide, when you have, it's a great deterrent to the virus, whatever virus, not only this virus. So somebody said the other day, can we hum our way to health? It's like hum. It actually helps. It's been tested in labs now that nitric oxide is produced as soon as you start making the ma sound. So Om has metaphysical, philosophical and practical appliances. Application, sorry, not appliance. So this is Om.
Thank you for sharing on that. We have about 12 minutes left, so I wanted to turn to some of the questions that had come in from people around the world. This one is from Jagdish Singh in Karnataka, and one of his questions is, and this is a question that's shared by other people, but there's a few places in the Yoga Sutras where it talks about the seer and the seen as one. Can you elaborate on that?
Right. I can go into the Vedantic aspect of it. I can also go into the psychological aspect. Let me be practical about it. In simple language, let me explain. Right? Okay. Now when I sit down and say, let me watch my mind, what is happening? One part of my mind, which becomes the watcher, witness, is separating itself from the other part of my mind which I am watching. Right? I am saying, look, let me be a witness, let me not be caught up in other thoughts which are happening. So let me watch this mind which is acting, which is moving, which is getting angry, which is sometimes quiet, and I am watching. Now who is watching? Who is the seer here? Me. There is actually no difference between the seer and the seen here. Not physical seer and the seen, that is a different matter. Talking about when I sit down and say I am looking at something, I am looking at myself. What am I looking at? I can for instance separate myself in my mind into two divisions and say I am not any of this nonsense which I do not like, which is my mind, not anybody else's mind. I am that supreme self and I am watching. It is an artificial division. Actually the watcher is not different from what is being watched. It is all one thing, one bundle, which is called the mind, thought. And without thought there is no mind. So where is the seer and where is the seen? Where is the separation there? There is no separation. When this becomes completely clear that there is no separation and that I am creating an artificial division, then that division disappears when I am fully convinced. Then there is no seer and there is no seen. Nobody is attempting to do anything. Everything is in its natural state.
Thank you. There's another question from Santosh Kumar in Dubai, and one of his questions is it only when one attains Kaivalya or Nirvana that one is free of doubt and fear?
True. Because till that freedom is attained, there is always doubt. You cannot eliminate doubts. You see, you eliminate one doubt, another doubt comes up. You eliminate that, another one comes up. Until one realizes that the actual barrier is this doubt. This cycle of doubts is the barrier. When it is fully understood this way, then doubts begin to withdraw because they know that we can't trouble this guy anymore. Because otherwise what happens, by constant doubting, the doubt at the faculty of doubting attains its own personality. The doubting Thomas. And this doubting Thomas cannot be eliminated because it is part of me. I can't eliminate myself. Until I realize that this cycle of doubts and clearing the doubts and again another doubt, and it's a vicious cycle and it's better to be free of it. When this becomes clear, then the doubt ceases. Now this can become clear only when all the vrittis are removed from the mind and one has understood the Purusha. Then only this doubt can cease. Till then you can clear one doubt, another one will come up. You should clear. I am not saying you should not clear your doubts. You should clear your doubts. Keep on clearing till you come to this understanding. This doubt itself needs clearing, the concept of doubt, because it is based on not on universal factors but on limited factors.
Right. But isn't it also true that just the practice of yoga almost gives one confidence for the next step, right? You take a step and that lets you have the faith that I can do another step,
of course,
which kind of clears the doubt.
Of course, but then that needs practice. But many people are lazy. They won't practice. They will try to find a theoretical solution, but they will not get into the practicals. If this is happening, then it's okay, you're on your move. On the move,
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. There's someone who's asking about losing how to lose awareness of the body. But I think, the deeper question is, in the process of deepening into samadhi, is it that we're seeking to lose awareness of the body, or to have subtle awareness of the body, or to somehow transcend? What's the meeting point between the body and the sort of super conscious state?
Look, in the state called samadhi, now samadhi also has many stages. The first samadhi, which is called the Savikalpa Samadhi, has vikalpas in it, which means there are still seeds of thought which temporarily are not seen on the surface, but the seeds are still existing in the mind. They can sprout at any time. And in the next stage called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, even the seeds have been eliminated. When that happens, then one need not worry about body awareness or non-awareness or anything of that kind. But in the first stage of samadhi, when the mind becomes deep, all awareness of the body is lost. In the higher stage of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, where there is not a single seed which can sprout, everything has been finished off, then there is no question of being aware or not aware of the body, because then awareness becomes a very subtle affair. But in the beginning, in deep meditation and samadhi, the awareness of the body is certainly lost, no question about that. You're not even aware of the pain or the discomfort. Or in fact, if you're in a deep state of samadhi and when you wake up, you might take a couple of minutes or sometimes more to come back to normal, because you might find that your legs are kind of semi-paralyzed, or you had possible, because you're not aware of what's happening. The blood supply has been cut, but you're not aware of that. But there is no need to fear, it will come back. You're not going to be permanently paralyzed.
Yeah. There's a question from Praveen Kumar in Kerala, and he's asking about the order, right? Patanjali talks about the order of the sort of, Ashtanga order. But he's like, can we do asanas and pranayam before we do japa or after? I guess more broadly, are all of these things meant to be sequential, meaning you perfect morality and then you sort of move on to the next stage?
Good
or are you
question.
practicing them all at the same time?
Good question. Good question. Coming from the land of Adi Shankara, very good question. I think, you know what, if we wait till we perfect all our moral guidelines, all our moral characteristics and traits, if you wait till all this is perfected, then in a lifetime we may not go to the next part. So, the advice, practical advice for me would be to start with perfecting the yama niyamas, meanwhile go to the other steps like asana, pranayama and so on. As you do the asanas and pranayamas and go into pratyahara and dharana, you will also be able to practice the yama niyamas better. It can't be, it's very difficult to, then for years we might be trying to perfect that and we have no other joy or happiness left, so it will come back again to this. So, when you start the practice of asanas and pranayam, then you begin to enjoy something which is other than ordinary, at least somewhat. And when this happens, then there is an incentive to practice yama niyamas better. I'll give you a simple example. In deep states of trance, the mind is drunk fully. Even some Sufis have described it as drink the wine of annihilation. Annihilation meaning physical annihilation, limitedness. Now, there is a young man who wants to, or a young lady now, who wants to practice yama niyamas. One of them says, don't use substances to alter the state of your mind. She is accustomed to having a glass of wine or a whiskey every evening. What is her incentive to stop it? Because she is enjoying it. So, while she starts to try to eliminate this habit, she should go further and practice the asanas and so on, till that she begins to enjoy something which she sees is better in many ways than this. Then this is gone. This is an extreme example, I am just to point out, because Kerala is a state where maximum liquor is drunk and sold. So, that is why I am saying it is no more like Shankara's state. Okay. So, I am just giving you this example because this gentleman comes from Kerala. In fact, I have been trying to teach yoga training to the communist cadres because that will keep them away from the bars.
Right. Wonderful. We are at the top of the hour with 1 minute left, and I'm wondering if we can use our final minute in just sort of silent prayer. I know India is in the midst of this tragic and horrible wave of the virus. So if we can use our last minute in just, maybe the worldwide audience can join us in just 1 minute of silent prayer.
And also we should keep in mind that this shall also pass. Right.
Okay, so
Rahul.
1 minute.
Thank you. 1 minute. Chant Om once and then meditate quietly. And then when I say Hari Om Tat Sat, we can open our eyes.
Okay.
Right.
Om.
Hari Om Tat Sat. Thank you.
Thank you for making
I
time. This
I
was
wish
wonderful.
I hope I was useful in some way. So thank
Of
you.
course, always.
Thank you.
Thank you.